It's our great pleasure and honor today to welcome Ms. Jessica Ward, who's here she's an office management specialist, just returning from an assignment at the American Embassy in Dhaka, Bangladesh. She's on her way to Vienna, so she has finished her hardship post with distinction, and now will be learning German. A French speaker who learned French, I understand, at BYU and in her schooling. She has lived in Paris, also lived in Taiwan. So she's a good example of a lot of the interesting places you can go, a lot of the interesting things you can do, and a great representative of the Foreign Service. She is speaking here as part of the Secretary of State's Hometown Diplomats program, which is an opportunity to allow and arrange for diplomats as they visit their families and come home for leave to make a stop off at their alma maters or local universities. And so she's already been on the speaker circuit here in Utah. This is not her first talk. We're very pleased to have Jessica here because as a humanities graduate from BYU and as a BYU alum, that just sweetens the pot even more. So this small group, but we do want to allow time for you to talk to Jessica and also maybe questions if time allows. But please join me in welcoming Ms. Jessica Ward.
Whoa. Falling in. There's a trap down here. You got to watch out for that. I'll just go on this side of the table. My name is Jessica Ward, and it is my great privilege to be here today. I can't tell you, because all of you are students right now, you may be standing here someday. It's a very interesting experience to come back, not as a student, but to be addressing the students. But it's very fun to be here. Corey gave me a great introduction. I am really so much more about questions. So what I'm going to do is give you the 5-minute rundown on how I came to be in the job that I'm in, and then I want you to ask questions about it, and I will answer those for as long as you have them. I graduated in humanities. If you're a humanities major, you know that you don't actually know what you're going to do when you graduate, but you're pretty sure you can find a job. I left college and had a friend who was going to teach English in Taiwan, and she was like, come with me. I was like, well, I'm not doing anything else. Okay, I'll go teach English in Taiwan. So I did that, and it was a great experience. I had originally signed up for 6 months and loved it so much that I extended for another 6 months and was there for a year and had a great time in Taiwan. I recommend it as a place to go. But I have to say that the one thing I learned from Taiwan was that living in a place was different from visiting a place. My family came and had the wonderful experience of traveling around and saw great things there, but they did not have the same experience that I had living there, going to church there, interacting with the people there. And I realized that that was more interesting to me than just traveling. And I love to travel. I have parents who love to travel, and I blame all of this on them. I got the travel bug from them, and now it's their fault that I live really far away. But traveling, it's just not the same. Those 10 days through Europe, you can see a lot of cool things, but you will not meet the people. You will not have that on the ground, on the streets, walking around, coming upon amazing sights that the guidebooks never talk about experience. And that was what I really loved. And so I kind of was on the prowl for more of that. After I finished my time in Taiwan, I came back to Utah and was putzing around and trying to figure out what to do next, and had an opportunity come up to go and live in Paris and work as a nanny. And so I jumped on that. I had studied French here and had lived in the foreign language house. And let me just give a quick plug for the foreign language housing. I got to Paris and it had been 5 years since I had spoken a word of French, but I was conversant still. And it was because I had lived in the foreign language housing. That opportunity to use the language every day and to use it in a daily setting was really what made the leap for me from studying to speaking. And that was a great opportunity. So if you're studying a language, look into the foreign language housing. It's great. So I was in Paris for a year and then had to leave that and came back to Utah and was trying to find what to do. And I have an aunt and uncle who live in Washington, D.C. This is their daughter here. She's come to listen today. And they said, well, you should look into the Foreign Service. And I said, the what? I had never heard of the Foreign Service. I knew that there were embassies overseas, and so in theory, there must be people working there. But I had never actually considered who was working there, how they got there. And so she tipped me off onto it, and I looked it up online and came across the website. I will write it down for you, for those of you who don't know it, because it's really helpful. If you have any interest in working for the State Department in any capacity, careers.state.gov can tell you every job they have. If you are an engineer, they have engineering jobs because they are building embassies overseas all the time. If you are a communications major, they have that. If you are whatever you are, they have something for you. So if you're interested in that opportunity, that's a great place to go. So I looked it up. Found out that not only do they have the officers who do the visas and do the politics and do the economics and all that stuff, they have the support staff, the specialists. So I signed up to take the Foreign Service exam, and at the same time I applied for Office Management Specialist. I failed the Foreign Service exam, but I got called on the Office Management Specialist, and the specialist ones aren't looking for people who pass the exam. They're looking for people who have that specialty and can work in that field. And so that was how I got into the Foreign Service, and I made it through and took my first assignment in Dhaka, Bangladesh, where I've been for 2 years. Because I don't know how many people here are LDS, but because this is a Mormon school, I can tell you that I arrived there and I was one of 4, 5 American Mormon people there. So it was me and another woman and her 2 daughters, and then we had one priesthood holder. That was our meeting group for the most of my 2 years there. So that was an interesting experience in and of itself. So I'm happy to answer questions on any of that. That's how I got into the Foreign Service. That's my story. Yeah.
You said that your specialist skills, what are those?
I'm an office management specialist, so what they were looking for was people who had secretarial experience or something along those lines. My bachelor's degree, along with, while I was in college, I worked in the English department office. I was a secretary in the department office there, and my experience there was what gave me the balance that I needed to qualify for their position, and then I went through the interviews and passed all of the interviews. So that's what they were looking for my job. They have computer specialists, and they have facilities maintenance people, and they have all kinds of, they probably have 20 different specialties that they are constantly looking for people. Yeah.
What does the Foreign Service exam consist of?
Oh.
Could you restate the question?
Absolutely. This gentleman has asked what the Foreign Service exam consists of. When I took it, there were questions about politics, maybe not specific to like political ideas, but politics in different parts of the world. There were questions about various countries. There were questions about the Constitution. There were questions that focused on what your management skills were. It was really quite broad.
How do you go about preparing for that?
How to prepare for it? Well, I told you that I failed it because I did not prepare very well. They have a study guide, which I had skimmed through, and that was pretty much the majority of preparation that I did, and it wasn't enough. The study guide is an excellent place to start, but I heard Corey mention that they have a preparation class sponsored by the Kennedy Center. Take advantage. People fail the Foreign Service exam all the time. You don't often meet people who passed it the first time they took it, and I think that's largely because you just have no idea what to expect. But if you really put the effort into it, if you go through that study guide, if you take this class that's offered by the Kennedy Center, I think you have a much better chance of doing it the first time. But let me tell you that many, many people, if they don't get it in the first time, they'll do it again and again until they get in. We have officers who took it 3 and 4 times before they got in, but they're in. They got what they wanted out of it. Yes?
How often do they offer the Foreign Service? I'm just wondering,
that is,
on a monthly basis?
How often do they offer the Foreign Service exam? Currently, they're offering it once a year. Thank you, Corey. So I guess in September
or November, there was a year and a half ago they offered it twice, but now they're on a new exam, a new system. It's also computer-based now.
Yeah, they've just recently upgraded the exam to computer-based, and I guess now they're
4 times a year. To be totally honest.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody else know the answer to
I
that?
don't know if it's 4 times a year, but I do know that they're offering the exam in July, of like just 3 weeks from now. And I think they are offering it again, so it's at least more than once a year, but it's still not as often as.
I think at the most it might be 3 or 4 times a year. So it's not like it's something you can do on any given week, but you can look it up on the State Department website and you can find out. When I took it at the University of Utah. I was living up in Salt Lake City at the time. I don't know if you can take it here on campus at BYU, so clearly it's close by. Yes?
Had you not been offered the job you had passed the exam, what track would that have put you on?
I had applied for management track, so I would have been working towards managing internal affairs of the embassy. Yeah.
Where did you live? Are you related to it by the embassy or where?
Yeah, it's not a compound. In Dhaka, we didn't have a compound. We had housing that was kind of in the neighborhood. I lived probably one of the farthest away houses, and it was about a mile from the embassy. So really nobody was very far away. It was a very contained area where most of the embassies were located, and most of the international people working at the embassies lived in this area, and so it was a very mixed area to be in. It was really nice, and I had a big apartment. Yeah?
You said you were going 2 years. Is that a common amount of time to be sent to an assignment?
It is. In fact, 2 years outside of places like Iraq and Afghanistan, those have 1-year assignments. 2 years is pretty much the minimum. 3 years is pretty much the maximum. The State Department likes people to shuffle around more frequently rather than staying in one place for a really long time. So periodically you can extend for various reasons, but you actually have to do paperwork and stuff for that. But 2 years is pretty standard. 2 or 3, depending on the place. Yeah?
Have you ever seen like married couples do it?
Oh yes, married couples. Actually, I think it's a much better opportunity for families than it is for singles. One thing about being single is that you're far away. Like, if you're a family, you take people with you who you know everywhere you go, right? So wherever you land, you've got someone to talk to. When you're single, you don't always have that, and you really have to work hard to form those new friendships and meet people, and you start over in each new place. It's kind of a challenge, and for a girl who grew up in Utah who's kind of relied on the church to be her social outlet, Bangladesh was hard in that way especially. It took me a while to really find people to hang out with and a crowd that I was comfortable in, and because it wasn't my church group, clearly, all 3 of the adults that were there. So that can be a challenge, and I think for families it's a great opportunity. I totally advocate it for families. I think kids grow up with a wonderful openness towards the world when they have these opportunities to live in other countries and go to school with people from other countries. The American school where I was at had, in each class, had students from probably, I think they had a graduating class of like 25 or 30 kids, and they probably came from 15 different countries. Like, it was amazing the opportunities that these kids had to just know people from so many different places and really broaden their own horizons. So that's a great opportunity, and there's a lot of what they call tandem couples in the Foreign Service, where both partners are employed by the Department of State, and they look for jobs where they can go, where they both have a job in the same country and move their family there. So it's a great opportunity. Yes?
So you're learning German to go to Austria, so you don't necessarily have to know the language of the country they're going to send you to?
You don't necessarily have to know the language of the country they're going to send you to. They can't have that high of an expectation for all of their employees, because they will not send you to a country that speaks the same language. They will, but not every time. If you're moving every 2 or 3 years, you're going to run out of German-speaking countries, or French, or Arabic, or Chinese. You can only go to so many countries who speak those languages. They have an excellent language program at the Foreign Service Institute in Washington. So they factor that in when you're looking at your next assignment. They tell you how much training you're going to need and what time that means you'll arrive at the assignment and how long you'll be there. And it's a process, but it's a good process. Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, as I've been preparing a lot for the State Department, but I'm not sure how much they help other countries as opposed to just helping the United States in those other countries. Is there a lot of basically kind of helping development, et cetera, of the other countries?
That's a good question. Is there a lot? Does the United States help development in other countries? The State Department focuses more on the United States. But if you're very interested in development, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, is a great thing to look into. They have development programs, and they basically look for money to fund programs in the countries. So I was in Bangladesh, which is a very poor country. We had about 50 State Department employees and about 25 USAID employees, and they funneled millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars into that country in various programs, health programs and democracy programs and all kinds of different things that they were working on. At the lower level, they were funding a Sesame Street program for the kids to be learning, and I mean, just amazing, amazing things. A lot of stuff goes on. So if you're interested in development, USAID might be the way to go. The State Department is involved. We more work with USAID. The State Department is not given money to fund programs. USAID has that. So if there's something that we're looking to fund, we have to really work with USAID to get something going. Yeah?
How much does your level of education affect your job potential?
The question is, how much does your level of education affect your job potential? They have a chart that will show you, like, if you have a bachelor's degree and you're coming straight out of college, that's pretty much almost the minimum that you have to have is a bachelor's degree. But if you get a master's degree, you may start at a higher pay scale. If you have some work experience, that may help you to start at a higher pay scale. So I think that it's less that they are not willing to hire you, but they're willing to pay you more the more education you have. So that should factor in to your decision, what you want to be making when you start in the Foreign Service and how much schooling you really want to get. Yeah, they do look at it, and it factors into what they're hiring, but I don't think that you necessarily have to have a master's degree to get in. They're not looking that specific. Yeah.
When you're deployed, do they just send you where your need is, or is some level of personal preference taken?
The question is, how do you get your assignment? They work really hard to make sure that people go where they want to go, but it's very clear when you sign up that you have agreed to be worldwide available. And if they need you in one place, then they will get you there. The vast, vast majority of people go places that they want to go. What happens is there will be a list of positions that are available at the time that you're finishing up your assignment and going on to a new assignment. And you look at the list and you look for the ones that are at your level and are in the position that you're interested in. And for each individual, it's different how they choose. Maybe they're looking for a certain location. Maybe they're looking for a certain job. Maybe they're looking. A lot of people prefer the small embassies, so maybe they only look for small places. People with kids will look for places that have good schools. People's ways of choosing where they're looking at is as varied as the people who are looking. But in the end, you submit a list, and then it goes to each of the embassies. They see how many people have applied for their position, and basically the embassies choose. So there comes a point where you kind of work the system, lobby a little bit on your own behalf. If there's a job that you're really interested in, you should contact the people who are working there, contact the embassy, find out what they're really looking for, let them know why you're good for the job, that kind of thing. Usually people go somewhere that maybe is in their top maybe 5 choices. They may not get their first choice, but they very frequently will go somewhere that they're satisfied with the opportunity. Yeah.
Because it's a government service, there is no, we don't make profits from it. So how is performance tracked or evaluated of the people who work for it? Because there has to be a way that people can be evaluated for what they do.
There is. Each year, they fill out an evaluation report on each employee in the State Department. And your supervisor and one other person will fill out that report. And they have specific areas that they focus on and talk about what you did in the past year that fulfills that area, and they have an area for improvement, and talk about what skills you should be trying to gain to be better at your job, that kind of thing. So every year this gets filled out and filed and put in your personnel file and goes on record. When they go to look at tenuring and promotion possibilities, they'll look at your past 5 evaluation reports. So if you maybe had a bad one in there, but if you're consistently good most of the time, then that factors in. If you have several bad ones in a row, then they realize that maybe this person needs to really work a little harder before they get promoted or tenured. So that factors in really strongly. Yeah.
What kind of things do you evaluate on?
They look specifically at management skills, leadership skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills. Kind of, can you play with everybody? It really is, does she do her job? Does she get along with the people that she works with? Does she interact with people of the host country appropriately? Those kinds of things are what they're looking for. Really, the same as almost any job. They just want to make sure that you're a good fit for the job. Yeah?
I'm interested in going to law school and in doing something possibly in the foreign service. Is there a law kind of route that you can do?
There is a route for law students. The Department of Justice has regional legal advisors throughout the world, but it's a pretty small program. There's a lot of people who are Foreign Service officers who have graduated from law school. That seems to be a pretty common choice among the officers, and so it's not. If you were really interested in doing justice work, you'd probably want to go through the Department of Justice, because in the Foreign Service, you're not going to be doing justice work.
Right. Or even, going to law school and just doing good.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of people have done law school, and I think just a basic understanding, if you do that, if you do international law, understanding, I mean, any schooling that you have is going to advance your ability to interact with the people and work on your job that much better, because you've gained that much more knowledge. Yeah?
Would you suggest, before whether it is law school, grad school, attempting to get into the Foreign Service and then do your grad school work, or do it in conjunction, or go to the school first and then?
If you want to the question is, should you do grad school first or just get right into the Foreign Service? I think once you're into the Foreign Service, you would have a hard time doing grad school. Maybe you could do it online, but I don't know that you live overseas. It's not like you can go to the local community college at night. So if you want a graduate degree, it's probably better to get it before you get into the Foreign Service.
And there's also a student loan repayment.
There is. The State Department does have a student loan repayment program, so if whatever student loans you have when you start, they work with you and they will contribute to helping pay them off. I don't know how it works, so that's the extent of my knowledge there, but they do have one.
Well, isn't like the average age 32 or something like that for?
I think so. Anymore, the average age.
Is that?
27, 32. A lot of people are doing it after graduate school or after working for a number of years in whatever field that they've chosen. It's very common now to see what they term the junior officers. They're coming in 30, 27, 33 years old. It's not uncommon to see them coming in around 40 as a second career. Yeah.
What are some common careers that they do before that? Are they in careers that are preparing them for the State Department, or
What are common careers before the State Department? Really, almost anything. People, like Corey was mentioning earlier, that there will be people who maybe they were interested in international affairs in college, and then they went a different way in their career, and down the road something comes up, something changes, they decide they're ready for something different, they'll get into the Foreign Service. Maybe they never intended to get into the Foreign Service, and then an opportunity presents itself, they get laid off, things change, it's not working for their family anymore, what they're doing, whatever it is. They come from a lot of areas. I have a friend who was into computer consulting. I have another friend who worked with USAID in democracy development, was working on elections in the Balkan region. They come from a very broad number of careers to come into the Foreign Service. Yeah.
What would you say to someone as I wouldn't suggest going in the Foreign Service of this, or just be aware of the downsides of the Foreign Service?
The downsides of the Foreign Service. Like any job, it has ups and downs. One thing that to be aware of is that it is government work, it's bureaucracy. You are not going to get away from it. You have to learn to play in the system. You have to fill out form after form after form. Everything you do has to be documented and accounted for. Every person you talk to, there's a lot of that. Also, if you are not a person who deals well with change, it's probably not a good idea, because you will, for example, I moved to Dhaka all by myself. I started working with a group of people, about 7 people in the area that I worked in. The following summer, 5 moved on to a new assignment, and we had 5 new people come in. We went for a year. I left. They're getting new people. It's constant change, constant. The people you're working with are changing all the time. The work that you're doing is changing all the time. Maybe you'll spend 2 years working on political issues in Bangladesh, and your next assignment might be, say in Bangladesh, I had a friend who really focused on human rights and in political issues. Maybe his next assignment will be really focusing on elections, and it won't have human rights in it anymore. Your job, even within the same cone of politics or economics, will change every time you move. Every boss you work for change all the time. So that's something to be aware of. As a Mormon, you have to really think about, can you live in a place where there's not a church presence? Can you, what is acceptable to you in where you're going? What kind of environment can you live in? What kind of environment can you work in? That needs to be a consideration also. Yeah.
How long do people typically stay in the Foreign Service? Because it's moving around so much. If you want stability, or what's the career rate?
There is a surprisingly low amount of attrition. I think once people get into the Foreign Service, these are the people who want to be there. They are interested in moving around, interested in living in different areas of the world. It's really low for people to get out later on. Most people stay in for the duration of their careers.
I worked for an immigration attorney, and I attended a couple meetings with some of these officers. When you're talking about officers in the embassy, are they ones like that who deal with the visas, or is that the same exactly? Like officers here, what they do here, is that what they're doing the same thing abroad? Or you mentioned some of the civil rights or political things. Like what are those officers?
That's a good question. The question is basically, what are the different jobs in the State Department? When I refer to officers, what am I talking about? They have, I told you that I am an office management specialist. We have the specialists that are computer people and office people and facilities people. We are the support services for our officers. There are generalists. They come in 5 varieties. We have consular officers who do a lot of the visa work. These are the people who would deal a lot with immigration. We have political officers who are the people who work with the local host government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the local government. We deliver messages from our government, we give the responses, pass them back to the government. We're basically the liaison from Washington to our host government, and we are the ones on the ground talking to the people in the host government. We have economic officers, and their job is to promote American businesses in the host country, and also to work with the host country to help them to bring their business practices up to international standards, maybe intellectual property rights, or getting their companies to be have appropriate labor practices, that kind of thing. That's our economic officers. We have management officers whose work is mostly to manage the internal affairs of the embassy, to keep human resources and the financial area and the all of that internal running smoothly. And there's public affairs officers who do the outreach and the press and handle all of that kind of. So there's 5 kinds of officers, and they do all of the work.
Also RSOs.
Who just asked about RSO? Oh, regional security officers, that's a specialist. So, but they provide all of our security. We love them.
What are typical graduate degrees that people come to the Foreign Service?
Everything. Yeah, really. There is not. Because there's those 5 different areas, you can get people who are focusing on any of those 5 political, economic, management areas, communications areas. Visa doesn't really have anything that lends itself, but really you can come into the Foreign Service. To my experience and knowledge, they are not looking for a particular degree. They are looking for a type of person. They're looking for a person who can be a good representative overseas, someone who probably has good diplomatic skills, can carry on a conversation without trying to beat their opponent into the ground, can work in difficult situations, can live in less than American type of living. They're more looking for a type of personality than they are a certain career that you've chosen. Yeah.
You're a specialist right now, but let's say you decided that you wanted to, actually I want to be a public affairs officer. How helpful are they towards helping you get into that career, switching around?
That's a great question, and the question is, I have started out as a specialist, but what if somewhere along the way I wanted to change? I want to do something else in the Foreign Service. They have programs where you can change. I've started as a specialist. I'm hoping that in my next assignment I'll have the opportunity to do what they call an excursion tour, which is working outside of your area of expertise to see if you like a different area. I am really interested in the visa work, so I hope to work in a consular section in my next assignment. And then, if I like it, I might try and switch permanently. But if I don't like it, I might just stay where I'm at. So they provide opportunities both as excursion tours, and then they have programs within that instead of having to take the exam and go through the process from the outside, they have programs within that you can work on from the inside to switch over and make that change if you're interested in it. I find that they work really hard to provide a lot of opportunities both for personal development in whatever career path you've chosen and opportunities to change if you're interested in change. Yeah.
Is there a lot of opportunity to work with the locals? And if there is there a particular area in the Foreign Service that you would suggest if you are interested in working more with the people?
The question is, how much do you get to work with the people in the host country and what's the best job to do it? If you're doing consular work, it is always with the locals, but you won't be their friend. You are working to make sure that people coming in have reasons to go back home, to make sure that people aren't going to get into America and then run away. So you are the hard line that they run up against, and I don't know. You'll get trained in the language, but those people that you meet at work are not going to be the people that you're probably hanging out with afterward. In the political and economic sections, both of those, you work a lot with local people because you're dealing either with people from the host government or businesses in the area. I don't think that there's any area that doesn't deal, because we also have a lot of local employees inside of the embassy, and so in any area you'll be working with local people. So I guess it kind of depends more on what kind of work you're interested in doing. If you want to, for example, be dealing with business leaders over there, then economics is your path. If you want to be dealing with like working to build up developing countries, USAID is the way to go, and they do a lot with the local people. So it just depends more on how you want to be working with them. Yeah.
Are ambassadors purely political appointments, or can you like go up the ladder and somehow become an ambassador?
The majority of ambassadors are not political appointees, or rather, all ambassadors are appointed by the president, but most of them come out of the ranks of the Foreign Service. And then the really cool posts get assigned to friends of the president. But most of the people who become ambassadors have worked in the Foreign Service for their whole careers. So the ambassadors that I knew in Bangladesh were all Foreign Service career people. And I think the vast majority of ambassadors are that. Yeah.
Is there a particular track that usually becomes ambassadors? Or?
There is not, actually. I originally would have thought that political would lend itself towards that, but even the management, which is the internal affairs, often become ambassadors because they'll go one step above where they are to the deputy chief of mission, which is the head of the internal affairs of the embassy, and you go from there to being ambassador. So really, almost anybody who is interested in moving in that direction can do it from any area. It's a hard goal to work towards, though, because there's not a standard by which you become an ambassador. It's not like other jobs where you get promoted and the next promotion is ambassador. It really is an appointed job. So when there's an ambassadorship open, they look at the people who are familiar with the region and what positions they're in right now and where can they pull them from. And in the end, it's a presidential appointee, but it'll be recommended by various bureaus in the State Department. And so a lot of it can be who you know, which is the natural order of things in the government. A lot of it can be who you know, yeah.
Compensation-wise, I know you mentioned before your education will kind of put you on how much on a track that you start, you know how much.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, is it enough for family? Is it enough do they provide relocation? Do they take care of that to your family?
The question is about the compensation in the Foreign Service. There's a lot of it, and if you added it all up, it would be worth a lot of money. But if you were working in the States, you wouldn't need most of it. Like the relocation money, they move you. They send packers into your house, they pack all your stuff up, they ship it to your next place, they send packers in to unpack it. Well, unload the boxes, you get to unpack. But they take care of all of that. They pay for your children's education in what are private schools when you're overseas, because they're getting American standard education in a foreign country. So it's a private school, and they pay the fees for those private schools. They pay, depending on where you're at, they will pay for you to come home once or twice while you're there. They provide your housing everywhere you go, so you don't have housing costs. There's a lot of different ways that you get compensated in the Foreign Service. And a friend of mine told me once, you have to really look at it as you are working for your country, living overseas. You really need to be aware of what things you're giving up and what's being replaced, and if that's worth it to you. Yeah?
How much freedom do you have to move about the countries you're assigned to?
That varies. He asked about freedom to move around in the country you're assigned to. It varies from country to country. When I first got to Dhaka, we were getting close to elections in that country, and as we got closer, there were a lot of riots. And so we became limited to what we called the diplomatic enclave, which was about 2 square miles, really small. And we were not allowed to go outside of that without permission from the ambassador and a security escort and a really good reason. In countries where there is not problems like that, you have freedom to go wherever you want. In Bangladesh, they declared a state of emergency in January, a year and a half ago now. And after that, there were no riots because they were against the law. And so we had much more, for us, there was much more freedom of movement. The embassy tries really hard to send the officers, for whatever they're doing, out into the country to see what's going on, to meet business leaders outside of the capital city, to meet political leaders, to get to know, to see how USAID programs are working. There's all kinds of reasons to travel for business, and of course, on your free time, you can go where you want and do what you want within the confines of whatever security restrictions the regional security officers have said. Yeah?
You said the regional security officer deals with security. Like, what kind of security concerns or issues do they organize, deal with, plan?
The question is, what kind of security issues does the regional security officer deal with? That probably goes beyond the scope of my knowledge. I can only speak to my experience in Dhaka. But they are the people who work to provide guards around the embassies. We do fire drills and bomb drills and chemical warfare drills, and they work a lot with the local police to provide protective services for the ambassador and for any visitors, high-ranking visitors that we get coming in. And they work a lot with the local police to be informed of what's going on. So I mentioned that there were a lot of riots. We knew where they were and what was happening because the police would call our regional security office and let them know what was going on. Did you have?
I was just say, one of the speakers who we haven't yet booked, but who will probably be coming in July, is an RSO. He just finished a tour in Tijuana. And before that, he was in El Salvador. And my understanding is the same as what Jessica said, is, for example, we have a security analyst at BYU, you may not know that, but he basically works with all the study abroad programs, all of the tours. Anytime the president goes abroad, or actually any faculty member who gets themselves in trouble in the country, or a student, he liaises with the State Department, he liaises with the intelligence services, he liaises with the local government, he liaises with the church. So he's a generalist, and he works to communicate with all these people. After the earthquake in Chengdu, we had a study abroad group in Chengdu. So he was on the phone with the RSO at the consulate and found out, and they triangulated where the BYU students were, found out everyone's okay, got that word back to their parents, talked to the church, talked to the media. So, and I don't know that many RSOs, but it sounds like that's the kind of work they do.
That is a lot of it. They are responsible for the security of the people who are assigned to that embassy, both Foreign Service and the Justice Department. We had a Justice Department officer in ours, and USAID. Anybody who is there under U.S. government authority the RSO has to keep track of them, know what's going on, know where they are at all times. If you're traveling in country, for example, we could travel, but we always had to give our itinerary, where we were staying, how we could be contacted, how long we were going to be gone, that kind of thing, so that if there was a problem, that they could find out where you were, and because they're responsible for you. And so there's this security offices, they do a lot. They're busy all the time. Even in a country like Bangladesh, even in the smallest country you can think of where you think what could possibly go wrong, they are always aware and in the know and on the lookout for what could possibly go wrong. Yeah? The question is, how is healthcare handled? There is a corps of doctors who are considered specialists in the Foreign Service, and in Bangladesh, we had a doctor who was there. He also worked from Bangladesh. He worked for the embassy in Nepal and Sri Lanka, I don't know, a couple of other embassies. So they're regional, and then they generally will have a nurse or a nurse practitioner at every embassy, and provide. That's in countries where you can't get good health care locally. In countries where you can get it, then they have places where you go to get it, and places that I guess, since I didn't live there, but I would think that places that they've set up so that you can take your American health insurance and get the services that you need there. They're very good about it. They will they'll do a medical evacuation if necessary to get you out and get you to where you can get the health care that you need. They pick up the tab for all of those things. It was kind of like socialized medicine, because we just had a doctor and we could just go there all the time, and he just would give us samples, and I never paid a copay. It was great. Yeah.
said a lot of people go into the Foreign Service in their 30s or as a second career. Is there any disadvantage to going in right after finishing college?
Is there any disadvantage to starting out right after college? I don't think so. I think people just come around to it at different times in their life. I think a lot of people start out in different careers and then see that they'd be interested in what the Foreign Service is doing, that their career has led them to some certain path. But if you're interested in it now, there's no reason to not get in while you're interested. Yeah.
We were discussing earlier about there was the written exam, but I also heard you mention about an oral exam. Could you describe what was the oral exam like?
No, I don't have one. I didn't take it. I didn't pass the written. The question is about the oral exam. What happens is, to get hired into the State Department, you start out by taking the written exam. And then they'll take, say they were looking to hire 300 people. They'll take the top 300 scores. Well, no. If they're looking to hire 300 people, they'd maybe take the top 600 scores from the written exam and bring them in for the oral exam. It's a day-long exam. They do a variety of activities throughout. I think they do some writing there as well. But it's another step in the process. You go through the oral exam, and then they'll find their 300 people they're interested in out of the oral exam and start clearances for those 300 to get medical clearance and security clearance and all that fun stuff that you have to get before you can actually work for the government. Anybody else? I covered everything?
Also the end of class.
Well, it's good to know that I can talk about the Foreign Service for an hour. After 2 years, I know that I don't know that much about it, but clearly I know more than all of you. Thank you for letting me be here today. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'm going to put my email address up here. Feel free to contact me. If you're coming through Vienna, you've got a place to stay.
Great. Wonderful blessing of networking in the church, you guys.
That's right.
We have a few refreshments right out here in the hall. I'm sure if you want me to approach Jessica on a one-to-one basis, she'll be around for a few more minutes.
Stupid email address.